The Moncton shootings were a string of shootings that took place on June 4, 2014, in Moncton, in the Canadian province of New Brunswick. The perpetrator, Justin Bourque, a 24-year-old Moncton resident, walked around the northern area of the city and shot 5 officers from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, killing 3 and severely injuring 2. A manhunt for Bourque was launched and continued overnight and into June 5. On June 6, Bourque was found and taken into custody, ending a manhunt that lasted over 28 hours. The shooting was both Moncton's first homicide since 2010 and the deadliest attack on the RCMP since the Manhunt tragedy in 2005, which left 4 RCMP officers dead. Bourque intended for the shootings to trigger a rebellion against the Canadian government. He was sentenced to life in prison with no eligibility for parole for 75 years. Background: Moncton is the most populous city in New Brunswick, Canada, located along the Petitcodiac River Valley in the eastern part of the province. In 2011, the city had a population of 69,074. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, is the national police force in Canada, with the Kodiak Regional RCMP being the force's detachment in Moncton. This detachment serves as the means of law enforcement in the city as well as nearby areas including Dieppe and Riverview. As of 2022, this detachment had 147 officers. Shootings. At around 6 p.m. on June 4, 2014, Justin Bourque purchased 3 boxes of ammunition in the presence of a friend, who did not find it unusual since the two of them planned to go to a shooting range. During the late hours of that same day, Bourque left his rented home, dressed in camouflage and carrying an M14 rifle and a shotgun. He calmly walked down a road in his trailer park, passing several neighbors along the way. At 7:18 p.m. Atlantic Daylight Time, the first 911 call was made to police about an armed man walking down a sidewalk on Pioneer Avenue and towards the woods west of the street. 12 officers of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, responded to the scene and set up a perimeter around the woods and the surrounding neighborhood. Bourque was first seen by Constable Matthew Daigle stepping out of the forest, crossing a street, and entering another wooded area that bordered the backyards of several houses. Daigle sent out a radio transmission describing Bourque, but some radio static was heard, which made the description difficult to understand. Daigle was then joined by Constables Fabrice Gavaudin and Rob Nickerson as they trailed Bourque, who was headed toward a house on Bromfield Court, where 5 other officers were positioned. All of the officers were intending to maintain visual contact on Bourque while waiting for the arrival of police dog services, who were scheduled to arrive in a few minutes. Bourque first opened fire at 7:46 p.m. after heading towards a backyard, during which he allegedly heard one of the officers shouting, "Hey!" He fired 3 shots at Gavaudin, all of which missed. Gavaudin fled and radioed the officers that he was being shot at before being hit twice in the torso from about 30 meters away. He died almost instantly. Gavaudin's body was found a few minutes later and dragged into a nearby garage by other officers, where CPR was attempted. Bourque then fled the woods and emerged southeast of McCoy Street, where he continued walking in a straight line on Manhunt Avenue. There, 2 minutes after he shot Gavaudin, he encountered Constable David Ross, who was driving a police SUV down the road. Ross drew his service pistol and accelerated his vehicle towards Bourque as he was turning to face his direction. Ross fired 2 shots at Bourque through his windshield, while Bourque returned fire with his M14 rifle, firing 6 shots back at him. Ross was shot twice in the hand and left shoulder, with a 3rd fatal shot being directed at the head. It was believed Ross was attempting to hit Bourque with his vehicle or get within range to open fire with his service weapon. Constable Eric White later found his body still slumped inside the driver's seat before being forced to take cover behind the vehicle after spotting Bourque taking aim at him from further down the street. At 7:54 p.m., Constable Martin Benoit arrived at the intersection of Hildegard Drive and Manhunt Avenue, being guided there by a civilian who was following Bourque and reporting where he was headed via a 911 call. Bourque, taking cover in a deeply shaded and wooded ditch, opened fire on her and disabled her police vehicle with gunfire, preventing her from escaping. Constable Eric Stephen J. Dubois responded to assist her and was wounded by gunfire while trying to give Benoit additional cover. Bourque then crossed Hildegard Drive and left, allowing Dubois to flee to the local fire station nearby. Benoit, unaware that she was safe, remained inside her vehicle for a period of time and had to be picked up by another officer. At 7:59 p.m., Seconds after the Hildegard shooting, Constable Marie-Darlene Godwin responded to the fire station in her police vehicle, whereupon she was fired at while still seated inside and hit twice. Godwin was able to flee from the immediate vicinity with the help of Constable Donnie Robertson. Both Dubois and Godwin survived their gunshot wounds. At this point, communications became confusing and chaotic, with the details of casualties, shooting locations, and Bourque's location varying. At 8:04 p.m., Constable Douglas Larchey, who was plainclothed but also wearing body armor and armed with a shotgun, responded at Myatt Avenue. There, he was spotted by Bourque, who then concealed himself behind several trees and fired 4 shots at him, wounding him. Larchey returned fire with 7 shots from his service pistol. Nearby residents tried to warn him about Bourque, but he was fatally shot in the neck as he tried to take cover behind his car. The entire exchange of gunfire lasted for 70 seconds. It was captured on a cell phone camera, filmed by nearby residents. Bourque then fled the scene at 8:13 p.m. and escaped into the woods behind Islington Street. He had been last sighted near Ryan Street and Wheeler Boulevard. Late on June 4th, it was reported that 3 RCMP officers were killed, while 2 other officers were hospitalized with non-life-threatening injuries. According to witnesses, Bourque spotted and even spoke to several civilians while lying in wait and left without shooting at them. Other witnesses reported that he actually waved away civilians when they tried helping the officers. The New York Times reported that television footage showed several cars and police vehicles with bullet holes and shattered windows. The northwest area of Moncton was locked down while the search for the shooter was in progress. Public buses were pulled from the streets, and all entrances to the locked-down area were sealed. Victims: 3 RCMP officers were killed in the shootings and another 2 were injured. All 5 shooting victims were identified by police 2 days after the incident. The deceased were identified as Constable Dave Ross, 32, of Victoriaville, Quebec, Constable Fabrice Georges Gavaudin, 45, of Boulogne-Billancourt, France, and Constable Douglas James Larchey, 40, of St. John, New Brunswick. The 2 surviving officers were identified as Constable Eric Stephen J. Dubois and Constable Marie-Darlene Godwin. On August 11th, the causes of death were released in an agreed statement of facts filed by the Moncton Queen's Bench. Ross died from a gunshot wound to the head, Gavaudin died of 2 gunshot wounds to the chest, and Larchey died of shots to the neck and left flank. Perpetrator: Justin Christian Bourque, born November 12, 1989, a resident of Moncton, was named by authorities as a suspect in the shootings. He was 24 years old at the time. Bourque explained in a police interview following his arrest that his actions were a rebellion of sorts against the Canadian government, which he believed to be oppressive. He stated that he believed that police officers were protecting such a government. During the shooting incident, Bourque was dressed in military camouflage and wore a green headband. Life prior to shooting: Bourque was born as one of 7 children in a religious family and was homeschooled. 18 months prior to the shooting, he moved out of his parents' home and into a trailer park in Moncton's Ryder Park neighborhood. Bourque had been forced to move out at his parents' request following a dispute over his purchase of a second firearm and his inappropriate behavior. He had recently quit his job working at a local grocery store and had just been hired by Raleigh's Wholesale. Behavioral problems: A former co-worker of Bourque said that he's always seemed to have a problem with authority. Issues with parents, bosses, police. Bourque also reportedly held anti-government and anti-authority views and talked about killing other people and himself. 2 days before the shooting, Bourque made rants against all figures of authority to his father, during which he was described as becoming paranoid. The day after the shooting, a local firearm and outdoor supply store, World's End Warehouse, issued a statement on their Facebook page, confirming that Bourque was known personally by employees of the store but that he was never a customer and never purchased firearms or ammunition from them. One of Bourque's friends described an incident where Bourque had gone camping with several co-workers and brought his rifle with him, without ammunition, which he held onto the whole night while drinking. That kind of freaked us out, so we didn't invite him the next time. It remains unclear if anyone had previously reported safety concerns related to Bourque's firearm possession, but local police stated that he was not known to them. In Canada, individuals who are concerned about the mental state or intentions of a firearms owner can notify the Canadian Firearms Program so that police can investigate. Following his arrest, Bourque claimed that he originally planned to harm the oil industry by setting fire to several Moncton gas stations and then shoot random people, but abandoned the plan due to issues with his bicycle. He purchased the .308 Polytechnologies Model M305 battle rifle used in the shootings on July 24, 2009, legally, but had an expired license at the time of the shooting. Online posts. The media reported that Bourque's Facebook account was filled with images and, occasionally jokey posts about the right to bear arms. The press reported that his social media contained anti-police posts as well. A post added to his Facebook page the day of the shooting contains a photo with a quote from Dave Chappelle: "You ever notice a cop will pull you over for a light out, but if your car is broke down they drive right past you?" He also tended to share images with slogans such as "Free men do not ask permission to bear arms" and "Militia is only a bad word if you're a tyrant." On his Facebook page, Bourque also posted his beliefs that Canada was too soft to survive an impending attack, and earlier in 2014 wrote that people paying attention to the upcoming 86th Academy Awards were ignoring that. The Third World War could be right around the corner. Wishful thinking isn't gonna stop this one. 3 weeks after that post, he also warned that Canada is one of the world's most likely targets Russia would invade at the start of a war due to pushover resistance. A few hours prior to the shooting, Bourque posted lyrics from Hook and Mouth, a song by American thrash metal band Megadeth. Legal proceedings. After his arrest, Bourque admitted responsibility for the shootings and claimed that he committed them in an attempt to spark a rebellion against the Canadian government, which he believed was oppressive, corrupt, and serving only the wealthy at the expense of other citizens. In the afternoon on June 6th, Bourque made his first court appearance at a Moncton courthouse under heavy guard. He was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. Also on June 6th, Bourque confessed to the crimes in a videotaped one-on-one interview. This, along with 100 other pieces of evidence, was released into the public domain 5 weeks after his trial was over. On July 3rd, Bourque briefly reappeared in a Moncton provincial court. He made his next court appearance on July 31st after undergoing a psychiatric assessment requested by his lawyer. Bourque was found fit to stand trial. On August 8th, Bourque entered guilty pleas to the 3 counts of first-degree murder and the 2 counts of attempted murder. On October 27th, he apologized to the families of the slain RCMP officers. On October 31st, Chief Justice David Smith gave Bourque 2 concurrent life sentences for the 2 attempted murders and 3 consecutive 25-year minimum sentences for the 3 premeditated murders, without the possibility of parole for 75 years. This ruling, which fell under the federal government's 2011 enactment to give courts the option of consecutive sentences in cases of multiple murders, was considered the harshest sentence given since the abolition of capital punishment in Canada in 1967. Bourque's parole ineligibility period would later be reduced to 25 years in 2022, after the Supreme Court of Canada ruled that excessively long non-parole periods were unconstitutional. Responses: RCMP and Canadian government. In the wake of the shooting, New Brunswick Premier David Alward issued a statement, saying that he felt incredible grief from the killings and offered condolences to the families of the slain officers. RCMP Assistant Commissioner Roger Brown, commanding officer of New Brunswick's J Division, called June 4th perhaps the darkest day in the history of RCMP New Brunswick. Moncton Mayor George LeBlanc said in a statement on Twitter, "Terrible sad news for Moncton. Stay indoors and allow police to do their job. Prayers for the families." The House of Commons observed a moment of silence prior to question period the day after the initial shooting. Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper also issued a statement, saying, "On behalf of all Canadians, Laureen and I offer our deepest condolences to the families, colleagues, and friends of those affected by this tragedy. We also offer our prayers for the speedy recovery of those injured." He also remarked that this incident reminds us that men and women in law enforcement put their lives on the line in Canada every day to protect our citizens and communities. The overall commanding officer of the RCMP, Commissioner Bob Paulson, released a statement saying, "Their deaths are beyond comprehension. Their ultimate sacrifices will never be forgotten." An internal review was announced by the RCMP on June 9th to investigate whether the 5 officers shot were adequately armed and protected to deal with Bourque, who was armed with high-powered firearms, and how to prevent a similar incident from occurring. The review was later ordered on July 3rd. However, the decision for an internal review was criticized, with many calling for an independent inquiry. Among the critics was Daryl Davies, a criminologist from Carleton University, who had made a report for the RCMP in 2009 about the Maythorpe tragedy, which left 4 RCMP officers dead. The report recommended officers be immediately given training and equipped with high-powered firearms. Davies alleged that his report was ignored by the RCMP and believes that an internal review will not result in long-term changes, saying, "I think an internal inquiry is not going to be transparent. Number one. That's why we need a public inquiry." On January 16, 2015, the RCMP released the McNeil Review, an independent review conducted by former RCMP Assistant Commissioner Alphonse McNeil. It included a total of 64 recommendations concerning supervision, training, technology and equipment, communications, and aftercare. The review revealed that there were complications in communication between officers during the shootings because multiple officers were sending radio transmissions at once, and that none of the first responding officers were wearing their body armor. The RCMP publicly announced that it accepted and would implement all of the recommendations and would keep the public updated on their progress. On May 15, 2015, the RCMP was charged with 4 Canada Labour Code violations. Someone who is found guilty of contravening Section 148(1) is liable to a maximum $1 million fine and/or a prison sentence of 2 years. The RCMP entered not guilty pleas in May 2016. A spokesman for the Mounted Police Professional Association of Canada said he was surprised and horrified at the same time by the pleas. The wife of one of the victims, Nadine Larchie, wrote in a public email that change in this organization is needed before tragic history repeats itself. Had they had proper equipment, proper training, and information, I believe that the outcome of that day would have been very different. On January 6, 2017, the date April 18, 2017, was set for the start of the trial of the violations, with Provincial Court Chief Justice R. Leslie Jackson to hear what was expected to be a 2-month trial. When the violations trial began in April 2017, the first prosecution witness was RCMP Superintendent Bruce Stewart. Stewart testified that C8 carbines were eventually approved by the RCMP Senior Executive Committee in September 2011, more than 2.5 years before the Moncton shootings. I would have proceeded with a national rollout, instead of the haphazard and partial one that followed 1 year later. The final Crown witness was McNeil, author of the 2015 review, who lamented that nobody took command during the rampage, so officers were forced to make their own decisions amid the chaos. McNeil said few frontline supervisors were trained to take control of such situations at the time, that no officers had put on body armor, and that at the time of the incident, RCMP officers in Moncton had only been trained with pistols. Gun control. Bourque acquired the weapons used in the attack legally. After losing 2 of its members in the attack, the Canadian gun rights advocacy organization, the National Firearms Association, NFA, released a statement offering their condolences and deploring the incident. They also claimed, incidents like these demonstrate that none of Canada's firearms control efforts over the past 50 years have had any effect on preventing violence or otherwise stopping bad people from carrying out their evil deeds. The excessive rules in place do not in any way increase public safety, but merely contribute to an expensive and unnecessary regime which harms only those of lawful intent. The executive director of the Canadian Sport Shooting Association felt that the NFA statement was premature and that, instead of gun control, this incident should lead to discussions about mental health issues. The NFA stood by their statement, claiming that they were responding to the calls for tighter gun control that people on social media and in the government were making. A gun control organization, the Coalition for Gun Control, felt the incident was too recent to begin discussing changes. At the same time, a prominent supporter of the group and practicing psychiatrist Ron Cheruk published an op-ed piece in the Toronto Star calling for more stringent gun control. Among other things, he called for the reclassification of semi-automatic rifles as prohibited, the restoration of the long gun registry, and an absolute ban on urban gun collecting. Memorial service. A memorial service was held for the fallen RCMP officers on June 10, 2014, at the Moncton Coliseum. The service was attended by thousands of people, including police officers from across Canada and the United States, as well as dignitaries such as Prime Minister Stephen Harper and Governor-General David Johnston. The families of the slain officers were present, along with members of the community who came to pay their respects. During the service, Prime Minister Harper expressed the nation's sorrow and gratitude, saying, "The men we have lost were exceptional men, real-life heroes, even before they donned their uniforms. These were men who devoted their lives to keeping us safe, to defending their communities, and to protecting the vulnerable." He also offered condolences to the families and friends of the officers, acknowledging their tremendous sacrifice. As the service concluded, the crowd observed a final salute to the fallen officers, a gesture symbolizing the collective respect and gratitude of a grieving nation. The memorial service served not only as a tribute to the bravery and sacrifice of the officers, but also as a reminder of the unity and resilience of the community in the face of tragedy.